First up on our buy or sell, expansion will benefit the NBA.
I'm gonna buy that. Now I'm not a business mogul or anything like that, but I'm gonna buy it because I don't see how adding franchises would really hurt, especially with how much basketball has blown up over the past 5 years. The growth the NBA has seen is ridiculous, and I think adding teams will really help benefit them financially, considering how much they've lost last year and this year. It definitely will help, but I don't know, man. I'm excited. I would love to see two new teams, but it's rough because you got to do the whole who do you want your team to protect and like the financial stuff with them adding teams, like how much can the team draft into their, you know what I mean, their cap space. There's a lot to think about, but I would say that yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I'm excited about there being two new teams. Like it'd be fun. Like I'm gonna root for them like a closet fan because I want to see those teams figured out. You got to think Charlotte still has yet to really figure it out ever since they were an expansion team in 2006. There's a lot to think about, but I would say that an expansion is the right way to go.
I can agree with most of what you're saying. I'm gonna buy as well. To play devil's advocate, I want to start off by saying if you look at expansions, Mark Cuban does bring up a good point. While it's going to cost $2.5 billion for the expansion fee per team, that's going to equate to $5 billion, which if you divide that up per 30 teams, each owner is going to get around $140 million. So that's really good for the owners, obviously. I'm sure the owners are in need of that money right now, especially with the way everything's going on with COVID. But again, to play devil's advocate, Caleb, if you do that, you realize that adds two more teams to the bucket of money. And by doing that, that means owners are getting less money. And that means while there's going to be more players in the league, players might not be getting as much money either in the future. So we don't know if that's going to be an effect, but I will argue that you brought up a good point. The NBA is only expanding and they're only growing every year. They're getting more and more money. The value of franchises skyrocket up.
Yeah, didn't they say that the starting bid for one expansion team would have been 2.5 billion? Like that's what the starting bid is.
Yeah. If you had heard me, I kind of just said that the fee was going to be 2.5 billion.
Sorry, I don't listen to you. I never listen to our podcast.
Yeah, we know it. We all know that Caleb just sits here and records, and he's like, "No, I listen." And I'm like, "When?" He's like, "When I was talking the whole time. That's when I listened."
Listen to myself.
Shut up. All right. If you look at the expansion teams, there are some cities that we're looking at right now that have been asking for teams. Now, a certain team that has been begging for a team is the Seattle area and the former Seattle Supersonics. Now, Caleb, how do you feel about Seattle getting a team? Do you agree that they should be on the list of the two teams?
I agree because I feel like the outcry from Seattle has been loud. But here's the thing. Seattle had a chance to really fight for their team. Like we saw it with the Sacramento Kings when they were going to move to Seattle. A lot of the fans were like, absolutely not. Like they were very adamant that that's not going to happen. The fans really fought for the Kings, right? Like they really fought for the Kings. There's actually a really good documentary on YouTube by Carmichael Dave where it talks about like the fight for the Kings. And I've watched it. It's really good stuff. But then you look at like the Sonics. There was like 15 people that showed up to their final game with signs that said, we want to keep our Sonics. Like, I just don't think that the love for basketball is as big as, I don't know. It's hard to go compare those two things, but like, I don't know. I think they deserve a team because I don't know who you would give one to over them and another team, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I feel like Seattle's a good enough city to get one back. It's just, it sucks. But I wonder how much fans are really going to support them, knowing that they got ripped away from Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Ibaka in that finals run in 2012. Lost it, but they made it. Because I can think of another team or another city that, you know, had a championship team move the year they won the championship.
Oh, and then, what team is that, Caleb?
It would be the city of Pittsburgh. In 1968, the ABA Pittsburgh Pipers won the first ever championship.
Throw it off.
Hold on. And they moved to Minnesota the year after they won the championship. So eventually somebody in Pittsburgh said, well, we want a team back. So they bought an ABA franchise, the Pittsburgh Condors. I'm wearing the shirt right now, okay?
Stand up.
I'm not going to stand up. But listen, immediately after that, nobody showed up to any of the games. And I understand that this was 60 years ago. I'm just curious to see how Sonics fans react to getting a team back, but it's not going to be like what they lost. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be it's going to be a long time before Seattle really gets that next stage. I would say if Seattle does get a team, I would love to see them bring in Isaiah Thomas because that's like a low risk, low reward type thing. He's a hometown guy. He would love to play for them. It would be cool. But like, even looking at this, when does Seattle get a team? 3 years down the road? Like
Yeah,
you
it's
got to
not happening.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen anytime soon, and that's
Yeah.
one thing that we're all kind of aware of.
They're just they're laying the groundwork right now for what a potential expansion franchise would look like in a couple years. So while we are technically getting ready for one, that doesn't mean that one's right around the corner. That doesn't mean that we're going to see one within next year, 2 years, even 3 years, possibly even 5 years. Like this is literally just laying the groundwork for a potential expansion. It's not even guaranteed.
Well, I want to go back to what you said about the Sonics and about Seattle not really fighting for their team in the first place. Can we talk about the fact that when they lost their team, yeah, there were some fans upset, but the Key Arena was empty. They were not supporting
their final
team.
game was like nothing.
Yeah, they didn't have anyone supporting their team at that point, and it made sense why they left. Sacramento has never not supported their team. They've had the worst owners in sports in the Maloofs that literally cut corners in every way possible because they were losing money year after year, and yet Kings fans were showing up year after year. They even drafted Jimmer Fredette because he was a college star, and they knew that that would help ticket sales. That's the only reason why they drafted him. There's a ton of reasons we can talk about that, but the Sonics in Seattle did not fight for anything. And when they were losing their team, they were so upset at Thunder fans. They hated the city of Oklahoma, and they talked about how they were backstabbers, how they're stealing teams, blah, blah, blah. Guess what happened? When they announced that the Kings were going to Seattle, the Sonics fans and all of Seattle were celebrating. How hypocritical is that, Caleb? That when you lose your team, you're like, that's not okay. You shouldn't steal somebody else's team. But then when you're hypothetically doing it back, it's all good.
They're fine with it. The whole situation to me, though, is just like, man, like when you actually look into how they lost their team, it does suck. Like it was kind of ripped away from them. Like the owner promised that he would do everything in his power to keep them in Seattle. Turns out all he did was say, hey, can we have a public funded new stadium? And they were like, no. And then they were like, okay, well, then we're moving. So he really didn't fight for them. But at the same time, the fans should have been more vocal about wanting Seattle to stay. And you got to think what they were ripped away from. Like they lost out on a really fun franchise, right? The Thunder, after they left, were like really, really fun. Just sucks.
I agree with that. But again, you brought up how you don't know if their fans would go back. I disagree. I think that they would all of a sudden start to show up just like they weren't at the end of the years, but I think they took it for granted a little bit. And the fact that they're getting it back, I think that Seattle fans will pack the arena. And I think the fact that the Thunder never won a championship is huge because I know a ton of Seattle fans that were so happy for Durant when he won it with the Warriors because they're like, screw Oklahoma City. You guys didn't win anything. If anything, that sweetens it for them because they're like, you got all this and you didn't even win a championship. So I think Seattle fans will show up, and I think that's a good destination. If I were to choose one place in the West, I would add that, and not to add conferences, but if I were to choose one team of the two, I would lock in Seattle. What would you as well?
I would definitely lock in Seattle because while sure you might be speculating how their fans would be, at the end of the day, they've had an NBA franchise. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of bank on it'll be safe to put a team there. It's a safe bet. I would.
You know what's funny about all this? What? Is guess who did a segment on our Halloween week?
I told you in that segment, I literally said, I don't care if it's realistic or not. I moved the Dallas Mavericks to Pittsburgh for Christ's sake. That's not even ever going to happen. I wonder
who talked about that. I wonder who predicted it. Which podcasters?
Me.
I wrote the
I wrote the segment and I said, no, Demir, we should talk about what a potential expansion would be. And he said, nah, I don't think that would ever happen. I was like, no, Amir, like for real, we should really do it.
I did never say that. You're just lying to our viewers. I hate you so much.
Sure enough, we do it. And then here we are talking about an expansion 2 months later. No, a month later.
We call everything on this show. I just want to let you guys know
We
that
do.
because
It's true. We really do.
we have a fifth sense. And someone say, hey, Caleb and Amir, isn't that a sixth sense? No. The fifth would require smelling, and I don't have that ability to unlock that yet.
Because he tested positive for COVID, so he can't smell or taste.
Yeah, because Caleb gave me COVID through our last podcast. Moving on, Caleb, who did you have as your second team on that expansion list?
Las Vegas.
Okay, steal my team again.
Let's face it, they've added what? WNBA, NHL, NFL, our Las Vegas Raiders. They've added all these teams, and so far they haven't really seen any financial thing. I know football, they didn't really get to even have fans, but they were sold out of like the first, all the games. So they did see money. The NBA, plus, I just think that Las Vegas is becoming more of a sports town, right? People are starting to accept that it's a sports town now. That would mess up the conferences a little bit, so you'd have to move one of Minnesota or Memphis to the Eastern Conference, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Minnesota kind of belongs in a conference with the Pacers, Bucks, Pistons, something like that. They should all, that Great Lakes area should all be intertwined. I don't know why Minnesota's playing in the West, but it is what it is. They did add all these different teams. I think Las Vegas can easily, very easily, hold an NBA franchise.
I for sure think they can support that franchise because Las Vegas is hungry for another team, I think, again. And I feel like they wanted a basketball team. I remember when I was a kid, the Maloofs talked about how they wanted to move the Kings to Las Vegas. And at the time, it was so ridiculous that people were like, no way, Las Vegas can't get a team. They didn't even have a sports team. People thought, oh, Las Vegas is too big of a distraction. You can't play basketball there. Hey, I even thought that with football for a little bit, but I was wrong. And I think football has been a really good place for them. And I think basketball is going to be another great place for them. We've seen it with WNBA Las Vegas Aces. They've had a lot of success there. I think you'll see a lot of success with this Vegas team. You mentioned it, Caleb. I spoke to a guy in Vegas about a few months ago, and he told me he was an Uber driver. And I asked him about the Raiders, and he's like, yeah, they've been sold out, and they have a wait list, like a long wait list to even get called for tickets. So it's tough to even get into Raider games. I'd imagine it's going to be the same thing for NBA. So that's why I'm going to agree with you on that.
What do you think about fans saying that Louisville should get a team? I don't think that Louisville is really a pro sports type town. I think it's more of a college fan base type thing. I don't know if Louisville could support an NBA team. I don't think they would. Kansas City's been brought up before. I don't think Kansas City is really much of an NBA city. What else? Virginia Beach, I've even seen a couple times. Like Virginia Beach would never be able to hold a franchise.
Areas just don't seem like they're big NBA towns, big basketball towns.
People have brought up.
I will say is Vancouver.
I was just going to say Vancouver.
I think Vancouver is a great destination, but you're not going to have Vancouver and Seattle. It's just not going to happen because
they'd be too close.
They're not going to do that. And you're not going to miss out on a city like Vegas now. I think the NBA is very intrigued in Vegas. And while there may be some problems in the future, you just don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll be a problem for now. And football's been fine with it, so I don't see why basketball having an issue.
Perfectly fine, except for Josh Jacobs getting a DUI. That's like the only bad thing that's happened. But another city.
How do you get a DUI? Okay, never mind.
I'm gonna bring up two other cities. Cincinnati, people have brought up. I don't think that they could hold an NBA team. But I don't disagree that a team should be in that Kentucky area. I think a team in Kentucky could do well. Cincinnati's like right in Kentucky, basically. The Cincinnati airport is actually in Kentucky. Did you know that? I didn't know.
No, and I don't care. So anyways, can you talk about the Pittsburgh area? I think that your Pittsburgh.
That's what I've been dancing around that. And
just talk about it, all right?
While I think we could, I don't think that the fans here are particularly I don't think that they would like NBA athletes for some reasons. Not going to bring those up because I don't want to get political, but I don't think that the Pittsburgh area would really like the athletes that the NBA has. Unless they were the Dallas Mavericks type players, the white Europeans. I don't think.
All right, Caleb, that's it. We got it.
I'm just saying, I don't think Pittsburgh, as much as I want to see Pittsburgh have an NBA team, I don't think that the people around here I don't think it would work out here.
My teams are Seattle and Vegas. Caleb, who do you have?
Seattle and Vegas. Those are the teams I feel like that's the team everybody should have.
Yeah, I think my wild card is Vancouver as well.
Yeah, I would say it's a wild card for me. I'd say that's my wild card pick.